Before we begin, this story involves an industrial disaster with descriptions of fire, smoke, and men making life or death decisions under extreme conditions. If that's something you need to step away from, we understand. Take care of yourself first. This episode's narration is AI-generated. The research, writing, and editorial decisions behind every story are made with care for accuracy and respect for those involved. July 6, 1988. 167 men followed every safety protocol exactly. They proceeded to the designated muster station. They put on their life jackets. They waited for the authorized abandonment order. Every single one of them died. The 59 men who made it home alive. Almost all of them, at some point that night, decided to stop following the rules. They walked to the edge of a burning oil platform 150 feet above the North Sea, looked down at black water they couldn't see in the darkness, and jumped. You're listening to The Unlit Room. Every story in here actually happened. That's the part that should scare you. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Today, how a missing maintenance form turned compliance into a death sentence on PIE Per Alpha. PIE Per Alpha sat 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen, Scotland. A steel city the size of 2 football fields bolted to the seabed 474 feet below. It produced roughly 10% of the United Kingdom's North Sea oil. On the night of July 6, 1988, 226 men were on the overnight rotation. At 9:30 p.m., the platform hummed with turbines and blazed with sodium floodlights against the black July sea. The air carried diesel exhaust, salt, and the faint sweetness of condensate gas. It was a routine night on critical infrastructure. Earlier that day, during the daylight shift, a maintenance crew in Module C had removed a pressure safety relief valve from condensate injection pump A and sent it for overhaul. The pump was taken offline, standard procedure. The crew filled out a permit to work, a yellow carbon copy form noting that pump A's valve had been physically removed and the flange left open, covered only by a temporary blank pressure plate. The permit was filed in the superintendent's office, not tagged to the pump itself, not posted in the control room, just filed. By 9:45 p.m., the night shift was 3 hours in. Condensate injection pump B, the backup, failed. An amber warning light glowed on the control panel. The operators consulted the offshore installation manager. They needed to keep condensate flowing or shut down production entirely. Someone suggested restarting pump A. Nobody in the control room that night had seen the permit to work. They had no reason to look for one. Pump A had been offline for hours, but pumps go offline all the time. The restart checklist didn't require verifying permits. It required checking pressure, flow, and electrical status. All of those looked fine. At 9:55 p.m., an operator pressed the restart button. PIE Per Alpha was designed with layers of defense, automatic fire suppression, blast walls between modules, emergency shutdown systems, muster points in the accommodation block where men could shelter and await evacuation orders. It was a fortress of procedures, each one built on the assumption that the other procedures would work. When Pump A's motor spun up, pressurized gas, condensate, lighter and more volatile than crude oil, began spraying from the open flange where the safety valve used to be. The pump room filled with a fuel-air mixture. Investigators believe a spark from the motor ignited it. At 9:58 p.m., the first explosion tore Module C apart. The blast wave shattered windows in the accommodation block 100 feet away. The firewall between Module C and Module B, rated for blast loading, not sustained flame, began to fail almost immediately. 2 firefighters, Robert Ballantyne and Gareth Parry Davies, sprinted toward Module C with a charged hose. Witnesses in the accommodation block watched them reach the module entrance. Then the second blast erupted. Both men were killed instantly. The control room operator pressed the general platform alarm and ordered all personnel to the North Muster Station. Standard procedure. What nobody knew yet was that the offshore installation manager, the one person authorized to order platform abandonment, had either been knocked unconscious in the explosion or was trapped somewhere the radio couldn't reach him. No abandonment order was coming, And the automatic deluge system, the overhead pipes that could have dumped thousands of gallons of seawater onto the fire, had been switched to manual override hours earlier. A diver was working in the water below the platform. Activating the deluge would have injured him. One safety measure protecting one man. 167 men about to need it desperately. The North Sea in July is as calm as it gets. On a clear night, you can see the lights of other platforms on the horizon, Tartan to the southwest, Claymore to the north. They're close enough that you feel like you're part of a neighborhood, not isolated in the middle of the ocean. That proximity, it turned out, mattered. By 10 p.m., the fire had spread across the production deck. Black smoke poured into the accommodation block through every ventilation duct. Men pulled life jackets from wall hooks and lay on the floor to breathe. Outside the windows, a 300-foot curtain of flame blocked every route south. The platform groaned, steel beams heated and deformed. The structure was beginning to fail. At 10:04 p.m., the Tartan pipeline riser, a high-pressure line carrying oil and gas, condensate from the neighboring Tartan platform directly into Pi-Per Alpha's processing modules, ruptured from the heat. A fireball the size of a city block erupted from the south end of the platform. Tartan platform, unable to see through the smoke and flames, kept pumping. So did Claymore. Both platforms were following their own emergency procedures, which required confirmation from Pi-Per Alpha's control room before shutting down their feed lines. Pi-Per Alpha's control room was gone. The neighboring platforms kept feeding oil and gas into the fire for another 20 minutes. Not because anyone made a mistake, but because everyone was doing exactly what their procedures told them to do. Inside the accommodation block, men were making calculations. The muster station was filling with smoke, no evacuation order had come, the passageways to the immersion suit lockers were on fire. The life jackets they were wearing would keep them afloat. If they could survive the 150-foot fall into water, they couldn't see in the darkness. Andy Mokan, a row-stir boat, pushed through the crowd to an outer deck. He gripped the railing and looked straight down. He couldn't see the water, he could only feel the heat from behind. He climbed the railing and let go. Bob Vernon, a maintenance worker, jumped from approximately 175 feet. Both men survived the impact and were pulled from the sea. The men who stayed in the muster station, who followed the procedure, who waited for the order, did not. Smoke inhalation killed most of them before the structure collapsed. At 10:20 p.m., the MCP-1 gas conservation riser exploded. The platform's structural deck gave way. By the morning of July 7th, Pi-Per Alpha had listed and sunk. 167 men were confirmed dead. In November 1990, Lord William Cool N published his public inquiry report. 2 volumes, 106 recommendations, every single one was adopted. But the report's most damning finding wasn't about the missing permit, or the firewall, or the delayed shutdown of the neighboring platforms. It was this. Under British offshore safety law at the time, the burden of proof was on the government. Regulators had to prove a platform was unsafe before they could order changes. It was the operator's right to run the platform as they saw fit until proven otherwise. Pi-Per Alpha, on the night of July 6, 1988, was operating entirely within the law. The permit-to-work system that failed. Legally compliant. The automatic deluge in manual override, permitted. The muster and wait procedure that trapped men in smoke-filled rooms. Standard industry practice. The fire that killed 167 men was, by the standards of the law, no one's fault. Lord Cullen's inquiry shifted that burden permanently. The safety case regulations, enacted in 1992, required operators to prove a platform was safe before operating it, not wait for the government to prove it was dangerous. Offshore fatality rates in the North Sea fell sharply in the years that followed. There's a version of this story where the permit to work gets posted in the control room instead of filed in an office, where the night crew sees it and doesn't restart Pump A, where 226 men finish their shift and go home. But that version misses the point. The problem wasn't one piece of paper. It was a system that assumed compliance with procedures was the same thing as safety. That assumed the people writing the rules had thought of everything. That assumed industry could police itself. The men who jumped from Pi per Alpha that night didn't survive because they were braver or smarter. They survived because they stopped trusting the system at exactly the moment the system stopped working. 106 recommendations came out of the KULN inquiry. New regulations, new oversight, new definitions of what it means to operate safely. The men who died waiting for an order that never came may have saved thousands of lives through the reforms their deaths forced. That doesn't make it fair, but it might make it matter. If this one kept you up tonight, good. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Subscribe so the next one finds you too. Follow the Unlit Room wherever you listen. Tell a friend who can't sleep. Full story on the main channel. Follow if you're wide awake. That was the Unlit Room. See you in the dark.